That's like the intro sound.
That's going to be crisp.
Yeah. Live? Are we on?
Oh, we're live, brother.
Sucking it.
So, welcome to the Generic American Podcast. I'm the host for today. I'm Gray. I'm sitting here with Ryan from Argenta Brewing Company in Portland, Maine. I also work here, but we're gonna flip the script, and today it's gonna be all about Ryan. It's gonna be all about Argenta. Why did you start Argenta? How did you start Argenta? Who are you? Why are you here? We're gonna get into everything. It's gonna be a fascinating, mind-bending journey through the founding of Argenta Brewing Company. And this is, season 1, episode 1. This is our first time sitting down to record, so it's gonna be a wild ride.
Yeah.
First things first. Like, who are you? Where are you from? What's your story?
Yeah. So my name's Ryan Dunlap. I'm the owner of Argenta Brewing Company here in Portland, Maine. Coming up on 6 months strong of being open.
We made it this far.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. So a little bit about myself, I suppose. I am originally from the West Coast. I'm from the great state of Nevada.
Great's a strong word.
Yeah, the state of Nevada, perhaps.
Nevada. Just kidding.
Yeah,
Nevada's beautiful.
So yeah, originally from there, and I kind of grew up there, went to school there, went to college there, and moved out to Maine after I graduated college, kind of looking for, change of pace. But
what'd you go to school for?
I went to school for accounting.
Brutal.
Yeah, something like that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you moved out to Maine just on a whim?
Yeah, more or less. So I was, like I said, I was studying accounting in school. I was going to pursue a CPA and go the corporate accounting route.
Gotcha.
But after working in tax and working in industry and accounting for a couple of years, my last couple of years of school, I realized I kind of hated a desk job.
Fair enough, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's some life events that led me to pursuing just other things.
Right.
I figured while I'm young, literally just fresh out of college, it's worth pursuing jobs that I might be a little bit more interested in. And I can always go back and get that accounting job if I want.
Yeah.
I have the education, but you don't always have the opportunity to kind of just move across the country.
Right.
On more or less a whim.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. So why Maine? How did you settle on Maine? Had you been to Maine before?
Yeah, I'd been to Maine once for, I think, part of a day. When I was, we took a family trip out here to New England. We went to Boston and New Hampshire, and we had a family friend that lived in Falmouth, so
gotcha. Yeah.
Close by. So we came up to Maine for a day to visit him, and I think we stopped in Portland briefly.
Right.
It was kind of didn't really think about it, but yeah. So I'd never really been to Maine before, but in school, I was dabbling in some home brewing a little bit. I had some friends who were really into it, who were a little bit older than me. So naturally, I was like, well, I got to try this out. So I borrowed one of those giant turkey boiling pots from my dad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's made for deep frying a turkey at Thanksgiving.
Hell yeah.
So I borrowed that from him and probably completely ruined it from using it a few times.
Why does this turkey keep tasting like beer?
Yeah, right. So I borrowed that from him and just started making beer basically in my backyard in college.
Wow.
It was it's kind of interesting. It was one of those things process oriented.
Right. Because you bake bread. You like the process of doing
Yeah, I'm crazy. I'm the person who is oh, let's have cookies. I was sweet. Do we have 2 hours to make homemade cookie dough and let it rest properly in the fridge and then do all the proper oven moves for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, a similar kind of thing for beer, right? So got really interested in that in college, and I don't know, it was just something. The more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it, and the more there was to learn.
Oh yeah.
it's kind of just like an endless pit of stuff to learn. And I was like, oh, sweet, I can spend a bunch of money on like homebrewing gear and then build like a kegerator in my house. And then it's like, oh, I have homemade beer on tap at home. And
That's
obviously
wild.
all of my roommates love that. And friends that came over because there's just, beer there.
Yeah, free beer.
Yeah. I think like at my college graduation party, I had like 1 or 2 kegs of like homebrew beer I made, served it up to everyone.
That's wild.
People
so
enjoyed
like
it.
People who like knew you back then like probably had some inkling like, oh, he's probably gonna start a brewery someday, or like he's gonna work in beer or something.
Probably not. I mean, I was so like dead set on going into like accounting. That was like kind of my thing. Like I was, a decent enough student in college.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed accounting because everything was just a big puzzle.
Okay.
It's like less of math than people think sometimes.
Right.
It's more of like a lot of word problems and with math like sprinkled in there that you have to kind of decipher.
I took a couple of accounting courses, and there is a lot more math than you are pretending that there is. But point taken. There is a lot more to it than just like straight math. It is very like, it's almost like, for me, it always felt like kind of sorting, almost like you're sorting different things into various little compartments.
Yes.
And then taking those compartments and comparing them to other. It's wild.
Yeah, it's very much of that. But yeah, so I mean, it must have been I did 5 years of college, did my victory lap. I was full degenerate my last year. But I think my last semester of school, I kind of realized I wanted to go somewhere else. I had lived in Nevada basically my whole life, other than like a semester. I went to school in Montana my freshman year. But more or less, I like lived there my whole life. So I was just kind of looking for a change, and I figured that was like the best opportunity to do it. I got some good advice that was like, when you're in your early 20s, it's probably the best time to like take some crazy risk and go do something that's like completely not realistic and doesn't really make a lot of sense financially.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted to work in brewing because I really enjoyed it. And I kind of like, it clicked in my head. I was like, this is something I really enjoy. It's cool. I can see myself enjoying this at least for like some degree of time. So I just started like shotgun applying to jobs all over the place, mostly in like the New England area, and I think in like Oregon too. I even applied to some jobs in Germany and like Europe that I like quickly got rejected.
That's
from.
wild. Yeah, they're like, bro, you don't even speak German.
Try again. Yeah. So yeah, I was applying jobs all over New England, and I probably applied to like 40 to 60 jobs.
Dang.
This must have been in like 2018. I didn't hear back from any of them except for one. And the only one I heard back from was Atlantic Brewing Company in Bar Harbor, Maine.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I didn't even know where Bar Harbor was. I'd never heard of it before.
That's wild.
Yeah. But I was like, and they also told me they had housing. So they had like a employee housing apartment that was like in town.
Oh.
So I was like,
that's crazy.
That's kind of nice.
Huh.
Yeah. So it kind of worked out, but it got to a point where I was like, I have nothing else lined up. This sounds cool. I like did some quick Google searches on Bar Harbor. I was like, this place sounds sick.
Yeah.
Just a little coastal town in Maine, like tourist vacation area.
The like quintessential tourist town. Like it's funny because it's like if most people know any town in Maine, it's probably going to be like Bar Harbor or like Acadia National Park or something.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even know Acadia National Park was there.
Wild.
Yeah, it really
completely sight unseen. So did you like visit before you accepted the job or anything, or did you just?
No. Because I mean, I graduated I think on like May 21st of sort of in spring of 2019.
Right.
And then I think me and one of my friends who I was looking for someone to come drive across the country with me, and turns out it's kind of hard to do. Like, do you want to go drive across country for like 4 days, taking basically 0 breaks?
Jesus.
Yeah. So I found one of my friends who was interested. So it was like, I think I graduated on like the 21st, and then I drove across country on like the 23rd. It's like 2 days after graduation. It's like 2 or 3 or something. But basically we just like booked it across the US because I had to be in Bar Harbor, I think by like the 28th or something. Because like that's when my job started. So I really didn't have like a ton of time. I wish I would have spent a little more time doing that and like seeing the sites.
Right.
But it was sort of just like, well, this is the situation. Like if we're going to do it, let's do it.
You're on a mission.
Yeah. So I think in my car, I brought my homemade kegerator I made. I was like, this needs to come with me, of course. And then just some like clothes and like cooking stuff. And like, that was pretty much it. I just like loaded up my
It's like a single carload.
Yeah, just like I had a Ford Explorer and just like loaded up what I could and then kind of left the rest behind.
That's crazy.
Like dumped it at my parents' house or something. It's like
I'm sure some of it's still there in the basement or whatever.
Yeah, right. Just hot potato that. And then just like ripped it across the country. Had a few friends that like kind of lived in various spots across the U.S., like Salt Lake City, and met up with some people in like Massachusetts that I could stay with. So that was nice. I think we only paid for housing in like Ohio. Everywhere else we were able to find some free housing. So I was trying to do it really cheap too.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is like this wasn't any like crazy job. This was like I worked as like a tasting room bartender. We were doing like brewery tours.
Okay. So kind of like lowest rung on the
ladder. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was just like, Atlantic Brewing is like one of the, I think it's like the third oldest operating brewery in Maine. So it's been around for a while. They have some cool history there. It's a cool little brewery they have built in this old like farmhouse that was from like the 18th century. Huh. So it's a cool spot they have going on there. But yeah, it's like this wasn't some like crazy job. I was making like $12 an hour plus tips or something,
Yeah. You like drove across the country for it.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone's like, you're insane.
Yeah. That's cool though. I mean, it's like getting to kind of both experience like a new industry, a new city, a new like part of the country that you didn't even like really know existed.
Yeah.
That's such like a wild sort of like jumping in with 2 feet into like a whole new life.
Oh yeah. And it wasn't like, the crazy thing was like a few months before that too. Like I think most people were like, oh, he's going to go get some like accounting job and make, this great money working for like one of the big 4 firms or something, or go work in tax or something like that. So I'm not sure how everyone felt about it. Right. I'm sure plenty of people are like, that's like kind of a brain dead move or something, but
he'll be back.
Yeah. Right. Like this isn't going to last long.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
So you ended up at Atlantic, and what was it like there? Like having come from the West Coast, did you have to like, is it kind of a culture shock, or was it like comfortable to settle in? What was it like?
It was definitely a culture shock because where I lived in Nevada and Reno, it's like metro area of like under 500,000. So it's not huge, but like decent sized place.
Bigger than anywhere in Maine.
Yeah. And Bar Harbor, I think, had like a year round population of like 2,000. And then with all like the summer like residents who like work jobs, it was like 10,000.
Yeah.
Plus like tourists. So, but it's like a very small, it's like I lived right in town, so you could walk or bike like absolutely everywhere.
Right.
And I'd never lived like on the ocean or like East Coast. So it was like I was like a fish out of water there.
I bet.
Totally different. And I was kind of naive in the sense that I assumed that way more people were doing something similar to me, where it was like, oh, I have this like, I'm trying to pursue like a career or a passion in something new. So I'm just going to go like work my way up the ladder and stuff. And I assumed like, oh, maybe most other people are doing that too, but I was like, I don't think that's necessarily the case for everyone.
No. I mean, yeah, you find your spot, you work there for 10, 15, 20 years, and like, that's as far as you think ahead. So like the fact that you're already thinking at this early in your career of like trying to kind of learn and move up and like kind of level up your skills and stuff kind of sets you apart from just the sort of average employee that you end up working with.
Yeah, and I guess so. I was like, it was a great place to live. I was only there for like one summer season.
Okay.
So it was like May through October, November. But incredible place to live. It was a fun company to work for. Incredible coworkers. Just like working in like kind of like a bustling tourist town.
Oh yeah.
Was super cool. Just a totally new experience for me.
Totally different like people.
Yeah, like around. Could not have been more different.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't have gone much further.
Literally
in the
and
country.
Still be in like the same country. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild.
But yeah, very cool experience there.
So from Atlantic, what happened after Atlantic?
Well, then I was contemplating staying there like year round. I really liked living in Bar Harbor. I think it was really cool.
Oh yeah.
Granted, I had never lived there for a winter, and for people that have like lived there for a winter, it's a completely different world. Every business shuts down other than like Hannaford's and like one bar and one restaurant for like all of the winter.
Right.
And it's nice, I think, if you want like some just genuine peace and quiet, but
for sure,
for being like a 22 or 23-year-old who was like single at the time, I was like, this is just not the spot.
No, exactly.
This is not it. So from there, I basically had like a 3-way tie between moving to Boston, Burlington, Vermont, or Portland.
Okay.
Only because those were like the 3 closest kind of like cooler areas that were like a bit bigger and like a year-round place.
Like 3 kind of like sister cities in a way too.
Yeah, and like people had talked well about all of them, and I was like, I could see myself living in any of those places. I ended up actually down in Portland, Maine. So I stayed in Maine, just I think on a whim. I was more or less just like flipped a coin. I was like, well, I'm going to go down there. I didn't have a job or anything.
Right.
So I found an apartment like a week before I was supposed to move.
Jesus.
Um,
That's like being early 20s though. It's like you just have no plan, but you're like, I'll figure it out.
yeah, again, just like loaded up my car with stuff. And I think like my last night in Bar Harbor, I'd like sleep on a friend's couch because my lease ended.
Right.
So I was just, and then I like moved down here and hoped the apartment was real because I hadn't checked it out yet. So I could have just been straight up homeless, but
it's that close.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I ended up in Portland and then just kind of hit the ground running, trying to look for brewery jobs. And I think I got one maybe a few weeks in. I was just like spent every day going to like a coffee shop applying to jobs.
Oh yeah, the classic.
Yeah, and then ended up getting a job at another brewery down here, Sebago Brewing Company.
Oh yeah.
Which is like, for the area, like a fairly large.
Yeah, pretty big.
Yeah, multiple locations. They do it. It's one of like the bigger brewery operations in Maine for sure.
Yeah, like you see them a lot. Like they have a very like strong presence, especially in like Hannaford and stuff too. They do a lot of like distribution. I feel like.
Yeah, a lot of.
And they have like restaurants.
Yeah.
So they're kind of doing it all. They're pretty big.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a great. I really enjoyed working there. The people I worked with were incredible. It was a really great brewery to learn how to like work in a brewery because it was bigger than most other breweries in the area. And I think at our like when I started, there was maybe like 12 to 15 like production workers.
Okay.
So you had like a packaging manager, you had like a head brewer, you had a whole like production manager. So it was like a very structured organization,
right? At
least on the like brewing side. So it's like we had our packaging team. I was working in packaging, which is like canning, kegging, all that stuff. Which in like a brewery is like usually like the lowest role.
Gotcha.
It's like you come in as like a packaging role, and like most of what you do is like you're keg washing, you're filling kegs, you're running the canning line.
Kind of like the grunt work.
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, it's all like incredibly important stuff, but it's in theory the lowest skilled labor that you can like get someone in at.
Right.
So it's like, again, took that job, was not making much money at all, and that's just I think the reality for a lot of brewing job. I'm not throwing shade in any brewery, but it's like they just like usually can't pay very well. It's not an industry where you're just like necessarily like raking in money.
Yeah, margins are slim. And so this was your first experience like working in production, or did you work in production at Atlantic as well?
I kind of weaseled my way in a little bit. They were like, I think someone quit or something early on, and I was always like bothering my manager. I was like, well, hey, if you ever hear of any like roll opening up, let me know.
Yeah.
So I was like helped out on like the bottling line. So they still did bottles back then, which I mean most places do cans now, but very loud, heavy. But yeah, the role I accepted like 1 or 2 days a week was you're standing on the end of the bottling line, just like catching bottles, throwing it in a case, taping it up, putting it on a pallet, and just do that for like 5 hours.
Wild.
And it was crazy too. You had like duct tape your fingers because the bottom of the bottle caps was so sharp it would like cut you.
Oh right, yeah.
So it's like you're trying to grab like 4 or 6 at a time with your hands, like put them in between all your fingers.
Weird.
Yeah, it was. So yeah, I helped doing that a bit. So I had like some experience of like understanding at least like the environment and like the dangers and like some safety procedures and stuff. So yeah, but it wasn't much. It was enough to like put it on my resume and be like, yeah, I've done this before.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, so when I was able to like get another job in packaging, it was at least I had like some experience of like what was going on to some degree.
It wasn't a completely foreign environment to you.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I was at Sebago for something like a year and a half or so.
Okay. Not getting paid much, but I'm sure learning a ton.
And it's a similar thing there. It was like any chance there was like, hey, can I like shadow a brewer? Can I help with like cellaring work? Can I just like do whatever you need? Chatting with the brewers and stuff, just trying to like learn anything I can.
I think that's so important. Like if you're trying to learn an industry like brewing, being interested and being present and just actively trying to learn is such an important thing, because it's like most people like they want to teach people things. Like they genuinely like think that what they're doing is cool, and showing it with somebody who's like passionate and interested, that's like awesome. So if you're there, you're asking, you're kind of like bothering them to some extent, and you kind of don't let them forget about you, then it's like that's an incredible way to learn anything you need to learn. Pretty much is just being present, passionate, and like willing to jump in and do whatever it is that needs to get done. Yeah.
Which I think is helpful. And like again, the coworkers and the crew I had there was everyone was like an incredibly hard worker. So I really appreciate about that place is like people worked hard and cared about their job.
You don't get that everywhere.
You don't get that everywhere, exactly. And I have definitely fond memories of that. Because it was fun, it's like we came in, we did our job, we had our schedule for the day,
Right.
and it was simple, but everyone worked hard, enjoyed themselves. It was a good brewery environment. Not every brewery, just due to the sheer size, is like that. Most
Oh, yeah.
breweries have like one brewer and maybe someone else helping. So
Wild.
it's just like a different environment.
It was like big enough to have like division of labor,
Yeah,
but small enough to still kind of feel like a community.
yeah, exactly. And it was cool. And this was, I think I was there for 6 months, and then like the COVID lockdown hit.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it was like I had lived in Portland for like less than 6 months, barely knew anyone here.
Brutal.
That happened.
You're like, what do I do?
I got furloughed for like 6 weeks, so I was just off
Okay.
work for 6 weeks. I doing nothing.
Right. Yeah.
All of my like room, I lived with 3 other people, and they were all working from home, and
Just
it was insane.
Wow.
Yeah, and then luckily, Sebago brought me back after 6 weeks. I think they had to let go of a couple of people, just like every company.
Oh, yeah.
But I was really thankful that like the packaging team there was like a core 3 or 4 people that they like kept on the whole time to like keep stuff running.
Got you.
But they liked me enough that they like voted me back on, basically.
Oh, wow.
Which was cool because
That's cool. Yeah.
people with more like seniority got unfortunately like let go.
Huh. I'm sure that kind of like passion and enthusiasm was very helpful to that decision.
Yeah, apparently. So I'm glad.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I learned a ton there, and that was like being there was definitely like, all right, this industry is super cool. It's fun. It's filled with really interesting people, and people of all backgrounds too. Is what I found is like I had coworkers who were in the military for a long time, and then they like got into this doing similar things. I had coworkers that were mechanics and all sorts of random fields that ended up in brewing just because they thought it was interesting and they really liked the work.
Yeah, it's a cool place to work.
Yeah, so you get all sorts of people, which is fun. You get like very diverse backgrounds. It's not like everyone came from the same college and studied the same thing and then made the progression. It's like way more diversity than that.
Oh yeah, that's very true. So after Sebago, what next?
Then I ended up taking a like brewing and cellaring job at Four River Brewing in South Portland.
Oh yeah, okay. Here's Four River.
Yeah, which they're no longer around right now, but it was like a good step up. So I was working in packaging at Sebago, and then I basically like the next roll up would be like a cellaring and brewing job.
Okay.
And I was sad to leave Sebago, but it was one of those things where there'd be advancement, but I think it would take a bit longer. It might be 2 or 3 years before I get some of these opportunities. And just like wanting to do more, I think I hopped on the opportunity just because the opportunity to go do something else.
Yeah.
Do a new role, keep progressing. And that was a lot of fun to work there too. A lot of learned a lot more stuff. Learned actual commercial brewing. Learned a lot about like running a brewery, kind of more of like the management side of things there. Got a lot more like hands-on experience in a different way because they were much smaller. We only had a couple production members,
right?
So it's kind of like you got to do everything,
right?
Versus
a lot
being
of wearing different hats and kind of doing one thing for a day, something else the next day.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a lot of fun. Again, the crew there was incredible. Like coworkers there, couldn't have asked for a better team. We put out some fun beer.
Yeah,
I don't know. That was much more of like the craft, like small brewery experience that you might think of when you think of craft beer. Just
for sure.
Very much like all hands on deck. Everyone's doing everything. Like the team is very cohesive.
Well, it's funny because like a bunch of the old Four River folks will come in here to Argenta, and it's like they're all still kind of like a tight knit friend group.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what is it? Years now since Four River closed?
Yeah, probably at least a year and a half or more.
Wild.
Yeah.
Still sticking together. So that,
it
was a cohesive team.
They did. And I think they had really good community there. And the more people we talked to, I think they were able to foster like an incredible community. They were in South Portland, and they were in kind of an interesting neighborhood because
like in a neighborhood.
Yeah. They were like in a neighborhood, like right next to house. It was cool. I mean, it was something that not every brewery had, where they actually had a community of people who really looked forward to going there, and they knew each other. And you walk in on like Saturday afternoon and half the people there.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was cool. I really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of one of the undergirding philosophies we have here at Argenta is community. So I wonder, is that kind of like where you first saw a community? I don't know if it's like the first place you saw it, but maybe where it started to click that like that community was just as important as like the beer.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely possible. I think, I mean, just what I enjoy about living in Maine in general that I think I didn't have uh, necessarily as much in like college and like in Nevada was just like that sense of community. And
Right.
not saying that it didn't exist, and you know it was probably just of like where I ended up and like the path I took.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have the same sense of community that I just feel that sense of community kind of everywhere in Maine. You know, there's something about kind of the more like old school, like it's an older state, you know, like people have been here for hundreds of years and there's
Yeah.
been families here for hundreds of years and businesses here for hundreds of years kind
For
of thing.
sure.
So it's like you just get that sense of community where, you know, your neighbor might like help you shovel your car out of your driveway, but they won't talk to you.
100%.
But
Love
like they'll
that.
do that without you asking.
Oh yeah, that's like my favorite is like
Yeah.
people who just kind of stay in their own lanes, but like are there to help when you need it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like they, you know, they're not going to smile either, but they're going to like help.
Yeah.
So it's, and that's something I found that I actually really enjoyed, East Coast versus West Coast.
Mm.
So like where I went to school too, there was a lot of people from California, so like really like West
Yeah.
Coast. So I had like a lot of influence on me in like college and stuff. But I find that East Coast people are less like fake friendly outwardly,
Right.
but they're like genuinely good, helpful, kind people on
Right.
the inside. Versus a lot of West Coast people might come off as like, oh wow, that's like the nicest person I've ever met in my life. But
Right.
like they won't necessarily be there to like help you when you like might really need it. And not saying that's for everyone, but just like
No,
genuinely or like kind of across the board, that is like what I started noticing almost immediately when I moved to Maine.
Oh yeah.
Is like that was just kind of the vibe. And I really like it because it's like I'd rather have genuine people who are
Oh yeah.
just who they are than somebody who's trying to be like fake nice all the time.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I've definitely heard that before. It's like on the East Coast we're kind but not nice, and on the West Coast they're nice but not kind, or something like that.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, more genuine and like people aren't like, you know,
Yeah.
they're not like full of it here as much.
100%. And it's like I feel like a big part of it, I've like growing up in New England my whole life, I feel like a big part of it is like we here on the East Coast have the common enemy of the winter, and I feel like that breeds a lot of solidarity where it's like
Yeah.
you may, you know, I have differences with everybody who I meet, but at the end of the day, like got to shovel your car out, or like God, it sucks that it's snowing again, or
Mhm.
oh man, it's raining again, and we can all kind of have this kind of commiseration about like the natural elements. And I think that kind of brings us all together, like uniting us behind like a common enemy. You don't have to like everybody,
Yeah.
but we all kind of have that sense of camaraderie and like we're all in it together.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah.
I like the vibe, the culture,
Hell yeah,
everything in like East Coast, New England especially. It's just, it's different.
it's a place to be.
Yeah.
So after Four River, were you there till Four River closed?
No, I mean, there was some kind of like staffing and like ownership issues. And I ended up deciding to leave probably a little less than a year before they ended up closing.
Okay.
Just like, you know, my own like personal issues with what was going on. And I was looking for different stuff in my career.
Yeah.
So I just decided it was probably time I'm done there.
For sure.
Um,
Came to an end.
Yeah, it came to an end, and it you know, it sucked. I wasn't stoked about it, but it was one of those situations where I think it was the best move for me and just maybe the company in general. It's like, you know, just
Yeah.
get out, do my own thing,
Got to do what you got to do.
move on. Yeah. And it's just, you know, some of this stems from just like frustration with workplace issues and, you know, whatever else. I mean, I've always had that issue with a lot of jobs where I get way too involved and then I get way too frustrated when things don't go like how I think they could go. Not even the way necessarily I want them to go, but
Right.
it's like there's this like path it could
Yeah,
go
you
in.
see
It
this
could be
clear path.
yeah,
Why
like
aren't they
it could
doing
be so much better than it is, and I feel like we're just like wasting it. So
Right.
it's just I get this like frustrated feeling, and it's happened in every single job I have ever had.
I guess that's a good. So Four River was your last brewing job, right, or your last like beer industry job?
Yeah.
Before starting this place. So like, what was it about your experience brewing that made you think like, oh, I could start a brewery. I could own my own.
I mean, maybe some of it being like a little naive and like what's going on, but just like similar to that, like one, I was passionate about it.
Right.
I had some like business sense, you know, I understood numbers. I've always
Right.
been incredibly interested in like entrepreneurship and business in general.
Okay.
I've always had some like business mentors who own their own businesses who I just would constantly bother with questions about,
Hell yeah.
how do you run this place? Like, what's your like cash flow look like? Like what's like the day to
People
day
love that question.
operations?
What's your cash flow look like?
Yeah, right. But just I've always been interested in that, since I was in like high school. But yeah, I think part of it was just I had experience when I was there doing a lot of like management work, like production planning, things like that.
Right.
I've had plenty of other like leadership roles in my life where I was, in charge of different groups of people. And I just like saw the opportunity of like, all right, I left this place kind of frustrated. I still want to work in this industry. There's still a lot I want to do. And I see a lot of stuff that like we could have done at these different jobs I've had that maybe just like couldn't happen for whatever reason for the companies.
Right.
Kind of some like gaps in the market that I was like, I think this would be a great opportunity to like move forward with, some of these ideas I have.
Right.
And I don't know, just kind of got that inkling of like, I don't know, maybe this is like sort of like moving across the country randomly after I graduated. Like, I don't know, maybe this is like a good time to try this. I've wanted to start a business for, most of my adult life, basically.
Right.
In college, I took some entrepreneurship classes. And actually in one of the classes, we had to like make a business plan and fully like plan out a business. So I forced all of my classmates that were in my group. I was like, we're gonna do a business plan for a brewery, and we're gonna like make this whole business plan. We're gonna like figure out all the numbers. We're gonna do our pro formas. We're gonna make projections.
Yeah.
We're gonna like figure all this out. So I like technically I had done this before. I'd made a business plan for a brewery.
Yeah.
Back then though, that was like the height of like craft beer hype, where it's like crazy beers, like cool, crazy sours, fun triple IPAs and stuff. And our whole plan was like, we're going to be the craziest, weirdest beer, like almost like novelty beer.
Wow.
Because there's this guy that gave a presentation to our class that owned this soda company. And the whole thing was like all the sodas just tasted like foods. Like one of the sodas was like ranch dressing flavored.
Oh.
Or like hot sauce flavored soda, just like weird stuff.
Dude, that's awful.
Spaghetti and meatball soda.
That's like a war crime.
Yeah. So I was like, well, this is funny. Like craft beer at its, where it was going back then was like insane. And I was like, well, this would be like a funny, let's like make a business of a craft brewery that just does like almost these novelty kind of beers.
Which like those exist now. They're out there.
I don't know. Well, there are places that do crazy stuff like that.
Yeah.
Maybe not like their sole business, but they definitely do. So, in school, I had taken those classes. I was super interested. So it's kind of like when I left Fore River where I was working, I was like, maybe this is the good opportunity. Why not? I'm still young.
So you get this idea, you want to start your own brewery. How do you even begin to like turn that from like a pipe dream into like a reality? Like how do you start the process? How did you start the process?
Yeah, it was difficult. It probably took me and this is one of those things where I think it was always in the back of my head that like learning all of this about working in the industry and trying to like be super proactive of like chatting with people and just like, taking all these different jobs to learn every position in a brewery I could. It was always in the back of my head of like, maybe this is something I would want to pursue.
Right.
So I have like dozens of like on the notes app on my phone of just ideas of like, oh, I went to this brewery and they did this thing cool. Like the bathroom was nice. So I like make a note on it.
Right.
Or like, oh, I tried this beer in Connecticut at this lager brewery and I think it was awesome. Take a note.
Right.
So it's like, it was something I've like passively always been thinking about.
So you kind of had like the answer to a lot of questions along the way of starting a business that you had already answered without ever really like knowing the questions. You were just like observing what people were doing right and wrong.
Yeah, in a sense, or at least like what I thought would be like a good opportunity and like a good way to do it. So it was, I think a lot of like the vibe and like the brand was something I had been building out for a long time and thinking about for a long time. But then it was like rubber hits the road and like, all right, like where do we actually like start this?
Right.
So I think it was like chatting with like a business mentor this guy I used to work for in college,
Okay.
who ran this bar and restaurant distribution company, like chatting with him and like, Jeff, where do I even begin for
Right.
this? And then it was just kind of slowly like, all right, like start writing down everything that you like think you'll need to start this place.
Right.
And that's where having like some industry knowledge was incredibly helpful,
Right.
because it was like, okay, I know everything on the production side. I pretty much know everything on like the bar side that I'm going to need, like tasting room stuff. And it was just sort of like jotting down like, all right, I'm going to need this hose. I'm going to need like glassware. I'm going to need a dishwasher, a 3-bay sink, all this stuff. And just like making these like insane spreadsheets. And then it'd be like linking them to like links of like where to buy everything.
Right.
And then it was, I think I ended up working with a University of Southern Maine has like a small business development center.
Oh, cool.
Huge shout out to them. So I was able to work with an advisor for free too, because it's, I think, federally funded.
It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely wild resource, incredibly helpful. So I was able to connect with them, and they were actually able to like help me like take all of my thoughts and be like, all right, here's what you should probably be doing right now, because there was a billion things in my head, and I was like, what's happening?
Kind of like order of operations.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, we're gonna give you this sheet that'll help you develop like your business plan, and you're going to start writing that. And then alongside that, you're going to start doing like your pro formas for like budgeting and planning out projections. It's like, okay, then you actually have these like spreadsheets they give you that you can fill out, and then you have your business plan. And then from there, once that's pretty like squared away, and you're like, all right, is this viable?
Right.
Is this something that's even like possible to make happen right now? Then it's, hopping on calls with like some other connections I might have who are in the industry or just like food and beverage industry in general. And like, all right, just kind of like testing the waters. Like, would this be something that is possible to do right now, given the market?
Right. Right.
And I think we determined it's possible. It's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
Because our whole take along was like, we're going to lean into lagers, and we're really going to work on brewing lagers. At the time, it's like they're gaining some popularity. They're like the most popular beer style in the world.
Right.
Most mature beer markets, they mostly consume lagers. The U.S. beer market is maturing. It kind of makes sense. Almost every macro beer is a lager.
Right.
So it's, I was like, that's our niche. That's like our take on the beer industry that's super crowded, is we're gonna do that.
Right. Because that's like the biggest problem I would see is that it's like, not that starting a brewery is untested, but actually quite the opposite. That starting a brewery is, you're one of 1,000, or what is there, 120 breweries in the state of Maine right now or something like that?
Yeah, like over 120 just in Maine, which isn't a big state.
It's crazy. So it's like, if anything, it's not about whether or not the plan could work, but how do you kind of stand out and sort of give a unique selling proposition in a crowd that is so full?
Yeah, exactly. And that was the big thing I knew. I was like, I think, at least for me, if we were just going to open another brewery that just brewed similar styles to everyone else and did the same kind of stuff, it's like you can probably stand out with your vibe and like you offer different events or like just like a different experience. But I think at the end of the day, the product needs to be different enough where it's like, okay, you at least like out of the gates have like a fighting chance of someone wanting to check you out because you're not the same as everyone else.
Right. Because I mean, you gotta kind of have like a, you don't want to have to spend too much time explaining what your unique selling proposition is.
Yeah.
If you're having to like, give a 10-minute kind of speech every time somebody asks, oh, how are you going to stand out in the crowd? Being able to just narrow it down to like a sentence or two, like, oh, we're gonna focus on lagers and make it all about community. Like, that's a nice, simple. I mean, it's not easy, but it's simple. And
simple is truly our like whole concept from the beginning too. Is like, that was another thing as well, is like seeing how crazy the market had gotten. You go on like a store shelf and every can you see is like crazier than the next one.
Yeah.
Super fun. I think it's great. But I think, again, to stand out, it was like maybe go the opposite. How do we be a little more simple than everyone else? Because it's like, okay, now the ones that are just like the simplest can is the one that stands out.
100%.
Because everything else is so different.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, going back to like how we got there. So it's like business plan together, put like financial projections together, like talk to local brewery owners, talk to local business owners, try to just get some sense of like, we're trying to just like gather information basically, like as much as humanly possible.
Right. Bounce ideas off of.
Yeah. And some people said this maybe not a good idea. Some people said, yeah, man, I mean, go for it.
Right.
I think that could work. So kind of all over the place with that. from there, it's again using like the small business advisors. We're able to set up our like able to incorporate. We're able to get a bank account set up, and then it felt a lot more real after that. It's like, okay, we have a bank account. I put like a couple $100 in it because you needed to have some money in it,
right?
For it to be real. We have our LLC filed, and then from there, it was again like talking to like connections and like, all right, I think I need like a real estate broker to help me. So we need a spot. We need a location.
Physical location.
Yeah. So I had some references for a great real estate broker who, we kind of hit the ground running. We chatted on the phone once, and then like she went to work, and like, the next week she's like, all right, we're looking at like these 4 properties. And it was one of those things where it was like, oh my God.
How surreal was that? Walking into like the first like commercial property where you're looking at it like this could potentially be like my brewery.
It didn't feel real in the sense that like this is like, I feel so like a fish out of water right 100%. Now. I'm like, oh my God, this is,
what am I doing?
What the hell?
Yeah.
And every spot we looked at for a while was like another business that was like moving. There was like a bike shop that was moving, and we're just walking around the bike shop and like, did this work? And like, I guess it's like, I've never like managed a construction project before.
Right.
So that was part of it too. And then I'm like, all right, before we like do anything, I was like, let's get, for some of these locations we looked at, it's like, all right, let's get like a contractor in here to like walk through with us, and just like, all right, I'll tell them like, hey, we need like a floor drain. We need like these electrical requirements from like tank manufacturers I was talking to. And then, they're giving me quotes, and, we're trying to figure out like, would this make sense? Does this fit into like our projections?
Right. Like, and maybe you could make the space work, but like, would it make sense to make the space work? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And a few different locations, it's like, we put some like a letter of intent in. So basically like an offer, like a non-binding offer. And none of those went through. And I think that like for the best, because I think it really took like 3 or 4 or 5 locations to look at, do the letter of intent to really realize like, all right, how does this process even work?
Right.
And then would this location work?
Right.
And that's a big part of it.
Because it's so easy to do like in the abstract.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, sure, this will work. Why not? Because it's like one of the first places you've seen. But then they start to pile up, and you start to kind of see like, oh wait, actually, I'd have to fix this one thing at all 5 of these locations, but this other one I wouldn't have to do anything to it or whatever. Or like, I mean, obviously you end up here where it's kind of turnkey, but
yeah. And that was the thing too. It's like, you don't know what you don't know until you really like get in there. And it was tough with some of these like projections and like this financial stuff, because it was like, it's so dependent on the location. Like, are we gonna have to like build out an empty warehouse into a like brewery?
Right.
I was like, the more we were thinking about it, I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think this is gonna work.
Right.
So, I mean, all this while, this was probably over 1.5 years of just trying to find a location.
And you're like working full time at this point, right?
Yeah, I took a job at a coffee shop that I thought would be like a 3-month long summer job. And I was there for much longer than that.
Hell yeah.
But it's like I needed to make some money, and I needed flexibility. Yeah. It gave me incredible flexibility where it's like, okay, a Tuesday at 3:00, I wouldn't be working, and I could go tour these locations.
Right.
Where, I had like family and friends were like, just go get like an accounting job, make a bunch of money right now. I was like, well, dude, I can't be tied to a desk from like 8:00 to 5:00 every day, probably even more. I need the flexibility of like weekdays to go do this stuff.
And also too, like if you're doing like accounting or whatever, like you're very like mentally engaged all day. Whereas if you're working in like a coffee shop, a lot of it's kind of on autopilot. So your brain is free to kind of like, I don't know, work on whatever it is you're working on at that moment. Or you have like the mental bandwidth to be able to like consider the brewing side of things as well.
Yeah. And that was part of it too, is like, I just need something I can just like get in, do the job. I'd worked at coffee shops before. I was familiar with like the flow of the work. I could do that without thinking about it too much.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, all the while I was working there and trying to just find a location. And then, yeah, one day it's like I get a call from my real estate broker, and she's like, check your email. I think we hit like a jackpot.
Oh yeah.
And that was for location we ended up moving into. And it was a local brewery this was their second location. Right. That they decided to, move back and just deal with one location to get rid of the second location here in Portland. So it was set up as like their pilot facility. So they had a brew house, they had fermenters, they had the floor drain, they had a cold room, but it was also a full tasting room too.
Right.
So it was like the all-in-one kind of more old school, like brew pub set up a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, my broker hit me up and she's like, yeah, check this place out. It's like literally a full brewery. It's like, this is like what we've been waiting for.
In like relatively downtown Portland.
Yeah, I mean, in
On
like
the peninsula.
Yeah, like in Portland proper, on the peninsula. Because before we were looking like off peninsula, and I was thinking, look, there wasn't very many like breweries off there. But yeah, I mean, it just those didn't end up working until we found this place. I think we found it in May of 2023.
Okay.
And then we kind of had negotiations and figuring out all the details, and we didn't end up closing on the property until the end of October of 2023.
Right. Okay.
So it was
like almost 6 months.
Yeah, almost 6 months of just like negotiations practically, and just trying to figure out all the details. And then it's still like, okay, as soon as we found the location, then it's like, all right, now as quickly as you can, let's plug all this into our like pro formas and talk to people about it and get some more feedback and as location and all that stuff. And then we're talking to the bank and the small business advisor and like everyone all at once. It was the whole process was like go as quickly as humanly possible to like get everything all set up,
right?
And then wait, and then wait 5 months.
Jesus.
It was like it's like you're proactive, but it was like an intense period for a while, and then it was very slow, and then it's really intense, and then it's really slow.
You're just like at the mercy of the process of whatever you're doing
because there's so many people involved.
Permitting and
yeah, I mean, then it's like, all right, is this place zoned properly? Are there any like liens on the equipment? And then we're working with an attorney, obviously, to like, because more or less we're purchasing all the assets from this place. We're taking over the lease. So we had our party for Argenta, we had the seller's party, we had banks involved, multiple banks involved, we had multiple sets of attorneys involved. We had to go to court for this as well to get it all like settled.
Jesus.
So it was many parties involved, and every single piece had to work out perfectly.
Right, in sequence.
Yeah, it's like we had to go to court for this to like deal with like the final sale of we weren't buying a business, we were buying all the assets from them and assuming the lease is what it was. So I mean, similar to buying a business, but we're not like buying the brand is what it was.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, when we went to court, I think there was like 7 or 8 different involved parties that all had to agree upon this at once.
That's crazy.
In the same day. And I was like, if one person doesn't agree, this doesn't go through.
That's nuts.
So that was super stressful.
Yeah.
All the while, I'm just like trying to get my shift swapped at the coffee shop and trying to like make sure like, I'll be in there at 4 definitely.
Oh yeah.
Trying to figure all that out.
Excuse me, I have to go to court for 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the place ended up going through, and then we ended up closing on this deal at the end of October 2023.
Wild.
So I got the keys like right before Halloween.
Wild.
And then it really hit.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh shit, I have to pay rent.
Yeah. Because then it was, I had some money lined up from different investors in the bank, from every dollar I've ever saved up, selling stuff to try to like, just keep up with where we're at and any money we need.
So it was like a combo of like loans and like private investors?
Yeah, we had private investors, family, the bank,
Cool.
Anyone who I could like bother. And they were like, yeah, that sounds like a reasonable enough idea.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, and then we finally got in here, and then it was kind of hit the ground running. It was start like ripping out old furnitures, old fixtures.
Oh, yeah.
I paint the whole place, building out the bar, all tables, all the aesthetic stuff.
Yeah, so it was mostly cosmetic though, right? Because like you had the full functioning brew house and equipment, right?
Yeah, and like all the bathrooms were installed, the cold room was there, all the plumbing and electrical was done for the most part.
Right.
So it's not like we had to. I wasn't doing any like construction.
Right.
But it was like building furniture and painting and like cleaning.
Yeah, you weren't doing construction, but you were like doing construction for like months. Yeah,
because it was pretty much in like the end of October. I think I was still working my job at the coffee shop for another like month and a half or so.
Yeah.
And that was exhausting because I was still working there full time. And then I was over here at least like another like 50 hours a week, just like doing anything I can to figure it out. And
I'm sure that must be terrifying because it's like you also don't like you should be doing something and that there's probably a best thing for you to be doing at that moment. But like what is that best thing you should be doing in any given moment? That must be like feeling like there's like a million fires to put out all the time, and like, where do I put my energy? Like, which problem do I solve first?
Well, let me tell you, I still feel like that every day. But
Uh,
that was exactly how it was. And it was like, okay, do I prioritize trying to get the bar finished right now so I can get the agriculture inspection done so I can move forward and start brewing, and then I can
Right.
get all the beers brewed, and then I can go finish painting? Or do I
Jesus.
finish that stuff, get all the painting done, and then get the bar done, and then get my inspection done? And it was just trying to figure out like what I need, what I don't even know.
Right.
Because it's like you're at the same time you're putting in your applications for your different licenses, but some of the licenses they don't want you to put in until you're fully done with renovations. But at the same time, I was like, we need to open at a certain time to make some money.
Right.
We can't just be like sitting around here forever. And some of these applications took a couple months.
Jesus.
And I knew that the beers we brew, lagers, take a couple months.
Right.
So I was like, we need to like time this pretty well and just like make this work as well as we can. So it was just like, again, like talking to friends who have opened other breweries, talking to like business advisors, and just again, it was like piecing it all together.
Right.
Because there's no clear path. And which kind of makes sense now looking back, there's no clear path, because it's like every property is zoned differently. You have different like city ordinances, you have different licenses based on like what town you're in or what you're doing. It's like, are you going to be doing like the tasting room model? You need a different license if you're going to do that, and then you might need different inspections. Are you going to be having like a full kitchen or just do some food? You need different licenses and different inspections for that, and those take different amount of time. So that process was fun. It was stressful just trying to like figure it all out.
Yeah.
But again, it's just like it's a puzzle, and it was
Right.
kind of fun like piecing together the puzzle and figuring it out and just making it work.
Yeah.
And I think that was somewhere around the time when we were working together
Yep.
at the coffee shop.
I was your manager.
Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm going to need some help with everything. Interested?
I was like, I got some random skills here and there. I remember I showed you like a video that I had made
Mhm.
on YouTube, and just because it was like, I can do like a documentary about you like starting this place as like a way to kind of promo it.
Yeah.
And you were like, yeah, that sounds cool. And then that kind of like blossomed into more of like a social media manager role. And
Mhm.
then it was kind of like, do you want to come on full time?
Yeah.
And it was kind of like over that period of time while you were here doing like the construction, I was kind of like, popping in and out. I'd come in, film you doing a few things. You'd be filming yourself painting the walls and
Yeah.
taking out the bar and stuff. And we just kind of started to like build it out from there and put together that little documentary to kind of tell the story about you starting this place up,
Mhm.
which I think you recognized early on that like that sort of social media component, or like the storytelling component of this business, was going to be like incredibly important to like the success of this place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was funny because before like the deal went through and I was like having like meetings with the landlords and discussing with them and stuff, they were hesitant because there was a brewery in the space previously that had not made it work.
Yeah.
So I mean, they were like, why? Like, with all due respect,
What are you going to do differently?
why? Yeah, why do you think you're going to make it work? And a
Right.
big point was like, I think we have to go hard on social media, and I think we have to like work on our brand as much as we can and make that something that's like valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's like, I mean, it's an incredible time to be alive and working in any kind of business, because you have like the most powerful tools that have ever existed for engaging with like your customers directly. You can post something and reach like essentially every single one of your customers simultaneously, all for free.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that more places don't leverage that better, because it's like you have all the tools you need. If you have a phone in your pocket, you have access to like the best business suite that has ever existed in the history of humanity.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard though. I mean, social media is hard. Like we've had
It
some
is hard.
successes. We've had some failures.
A lot of trial and error.
Some platforms do well. Some don't do as well. It's fun to do because it's like you do get to engage with customers and just like the community and stuff. But it's
and like make ourselves laugh, which
yeah.
is always fun.
it's important at the end of the day, and that's kind of what we knew going into this, is like it's going to be crucial to, it's not going to be perfect, and we're not like, professional like social media strategists, but I think you got to make it work.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of settled into a like strategy where we just kind of like try to be authentically ourselves.
Yeah.
And try to just kind of showcase like oh, it's like a little rough around the edges. Like this podcast. It's a little rough around the edges, but like that's it. Like it's literally just the two of us here doing this, and it's like this is authentic. This is us. This is us sharing what it's actually like, not just like a shiny, glossy version of it.
Yeah,
which people seem to respond to.
Definitely, yeah. But I mean, that was most of the like startup stuff before we really opened up, and then I mean there was definitely like hiccups with getting like our draft lines installed, and because let's see, so I mean we got in here at the end of October. We had our soft opening mid-February. It was like February 10th or 18th or 16th or something.
Like that,
it was a Saturday. We were open for like 4 to 8 for a soft opening. We invited we hit up every brewery and like different like friends and business owners and like family and whoever would show up, and the whole deal was like just show up here, let us like try to serve beer, see what we got, work on our systems.
My very first time pouring beer ever.
Your first time ever doing this. I don't know, we got some good feedback on that, and then
that was crucial.
Highly
recommend if anybody's ever going to do like launch any brand that interacts with the public, do a soft opening. And you will learn so much that you didn't know that you didn't know.
Because it's like, we found out like, some of the table legs we had were like way too wobbly, and people were going to be dropping beers. Like, all right, we have 5 days to scrap that and figure that out. And then it's, like, these things in the bathroom, we need like bathroom paper towel dispensers. We need more of those. What we had wasn't working. So we learned a lot, I think a lot of it was just like you get good feedback from friends. You get people that are posting on it about social media as well. That's important, like trying to build some degree of hype. Just to like get the word out there.
100%. Well, because it's like, again, you have to let people know that you're there and that you're open. Kind of like step one.
Yeah, exactly. Because then we had our full launch. Was it February 23rd? Yeah, that was our first day. It was a Friday.
It was nuts.
It was crazy. My like parents flew into town. And they still live in Nevada, so that's like all the way across the country. But they were here. We were here. And it was like, okay, an hour before we opened, it was like, nerves were pretty high. We're like, oh my God, I hope this works. I hope anyone shows up.
Please,
God damn. We had some issues with our draft system where the beer was freezing in the lines. So you basically go to open the faucet and nothing comes out. It's just frozen.
Bone dry.
So we had that like a week before, and we thought we fixed it. There was something up with our little glycol chiller. All right, problem solved, no big deal. We open at 2:00 on Friday, February 23rd. Literally, like, I don't know, like 4 to 6 people like come in, like right when we open. It's like, okay, sweet, people here. That's nice.
That's a great start.
Can I get like the American lager? You got it. I go to pour it, nothing.
Bone dry.
I check every single line. Not a single drop of beer came out of any of them. And I had checked this like an hour before.
Oh, yeah. In that intervening hour.
That was like the most panicked I have ever been.
Dude, you were running around
in the history
like a chicken
of
with your head cut off.
This place, yeah. Because like basically the situation is all of our draft lines had frozen again. And what that meant is like they don't just like unfreeze in a matter of like 10 minutes. These are like incredibly insulated lines that are meant to keep this beer super cold, like from the cold room to the tower. So that was absolutely wild.
It was insane. That was a crazy way to start the day.
Literally, the first pour of the day was frozen draft lines. And I was like, of course, this is like literally hour one. We just opened up. No beer to serve.
Nothing. Everybody was super chill. They were super cool about it.
And 2 people walked out.
Yeah.
And
I think they ended up coming back a little bit later, though. I think they were just like, we'll give them some time. Like, clearly,
clearly they don't know what they're doing.
Got something going on here.
Yeah, absolute hooligans running this place.
You're just running around. You were grabbing like a bucket of hot water and like pouring it on some of the lines.
Oh yeah, I like loaded up a keg with like hot liquor tank water. I was cranking up the pressure.
I forgot about that.
I was like doing every trick I could think of to clear these lines out. Turned off the glycol. I was like had the lines open. I think we got that thing cleared in under 30 minutes.
Yeah, it was pretty quick.
And it was. That was horrible. That
and
was an awful experience.
Everybody's just like watching you, because like I don't know anything about like draft lines or anything like that, so like I can't really help. I was just kind of chatting with the customers and
we were like giving out like seltzers and popcorn and like
please stay
5 more minutes, man. Please. Not a problem. We'll have this solved. But we ended up getting that fixed, and we ended up having an incredible weekend. That opening weekend, we were nuts. Like slammed the whole time.
Flying out the door for like 3 days straight or however long we were open.
Yeah, it was a blast. We like ripped through a ton of beer.
Learned a ton.
Learned so much.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Those first 3 days were crucial.
It was wild, but yeah, I'll never forget how our draft lines froze, and literally on the first beer we poured as soon as we opened. That was like the first thing that happened when we were open a business.
Hell yeah.
Can't
Zero product.
Nothing to sell.
So, okay, so that's like the actual physical opening of this place. But like, tell me a little bit more about like the philosophy of like what your take was going to be on opening this place. Like, what did you want to do? What did you not want to do? What did you want the vibe to be? Like, how were you like trying to think of structuring this place?
Yeah, and I think from the beginning, there was a few elements that I thought were really crucial. First and foremost, I mean, I knew we were going to be tasting room focused, with the space we have and the production equipment we have. I was like, we're not going to be able to brew so much beer that we can really like distribute much of it. It's going to have to stay in-house, meaning that like the actual space itself is going to be really crucial. So having a good vibe is really important. That was always key. Sure. I was like, this place needs to be like, I don't know, good environment to hang out in, very chill, very calm. So that was always crucial from the beginning. The second thing was I wanted to make a space that was a bit less like industrial and bro-y.
Right. There are a lot of breweries that skew kind of bro.
Yeah, and like I think it was just due to like when they came up and when they opened, and it was like,
and
when
their target demographic was.
Yeah, it's like when you open a brewery 10 years ago, and even now, it's like the zoning that allows you to open a production space where you can also serve customers is like this weird zoning, like light industrial. So it's like usually these buildings.
That makes sense too, yeah.
Yeah, it's like usually these buildings are like old warehouses or like something that is like very industrial, commercial.
Right.
So it's like naturally they're going to be a bit more kind of that industrial, like rugged vibe.
For sure.
But I think, there's so many of those that, again, we wanted to kind of skew a little bit differently. We wanted it to be a bit more bright and like fresh. Not quite.
Homey.
Yeah. And like not quite as like dark and like intense, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was a big piece of it as well. Having the right vibe, having, the right tasting room set up, having everything look right. We, light wood, everything kind of like matches and goes together well.
Yeah. Very like warm.
Yeah. And, the other crucial elements were, this needs to be like a community focused space. I think involving the community, having events, and really making this kind of like the neighborhood spot to hang out is crucial. The neighborhood we're in now is like up and coming. It's growing. There's a lot of development going on. So It's kind of getting in on the ground floor here, establishing ourselves as a community space, putting on events that people want to go to and hang out at.
Yeah.
And then, rooting ourselves that way as well as having good staff, people that treat customers well, having incredible service.
Right.
And just angling ourselves as like an all around, just like genuine good place, like we're not trying to be like anyone that we're not, we joke around a lot. We're, we are what we are.
100%.
I think.
And just trying to embrace that. And I think it's interesting. Like if this brewery had been somewhere that was more of like an established neighborhood, maybe it would have been a different vibe. But starting here in like what they call West Bayside in Portland, Maine, this was like an industrial wasteland. There was nothing here. There was, some single family homes and whatnot, but traditionally it was mainly like manufacturing and scrap yards and stuff. So there wasn't sort of this like cohesive community identity. There was like Bayside, but that was like the whole, like what is now East and West Bayside. So it's sort of like, as this becomes a neighborhood for the first time, we're here kind of at the ground floor providing like a gathering space. And I think that's like, it's both like we couldn't exist without the community and the community couldn't exist without us. Like maybe that's hyperbole. Like I think the community would still exist. They'd find a way.
Sure. Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like there's a give and take there where it's like, we're not just trying to extract from the community. We're trying to give back. We're trying to create something here rather than just like siphon out money or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, I think exactly where we wanted to be. And, the beer styles that we wanted to brew, lagers that are easy drinking. Again, part of this is like, I knew that the way the beer market is going, the beer is important, but the beer is not everything. And the beer is not necessarily why people even come here.
Yeah.
Especially like, I think at the beginning, you're going to have a lot of like beer specific tourists or people that want to try the
Yeah.
beer. But the idea was that you have product that people can enjoy and is good beer, but you're here for the social aspect, you're here for the community aspect more than that.
Right.
So it's like the beer might bring you in at first, or it might bring certain people in at first, but it kind of keeps you here. It's not the reason you're here necessarily.
You come for the beer, stay for trivia.
Yeah, right. Something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, and with these styles too, it's like they're not crazy flavors necessarily, but there's something you can easily drink a couple of without really thinking about it. Right. And that was kind of part of it too, is like, they're not so insane. They're like, I'm only having one of those, like, oh, I can have 3 of these because they're 4.5%.
Right.
And just like very drinkable.
Oh yeah. That's what's nice. Is like, you can just like sit for a long time with friends and sip a few beers and be like comfortably buzzed by the end of it, not like hammered off of a 9%.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was the thought too. Easy drinking, chill.
Beer flavored beer.
Beer flavored beer.
So this place opens, we go through our trials and tribulations. And then the shine wears off. Not to say that we like went downhill or anything, but you stop being the new brewery in Portland and you start being the brewery in Portland, or a brewery in Portland. So what was kind of like the next phase of opening Argenta after the obvious opening? Like what's been like the next sort of transition there?
I think the biggest thing is just like trying to figure out like, all right, now that we like are open, we've survived like the first few weeks, the first couple months.
We're not just going to crash and burn right out the gate.
Yeah. It's like, okay, how do we now try to like figure out how to build a community here? How do we start doing events? How do we kind of grow this a little bit more than just like Gray and I here?
Right.
So I think part of that was like, all right, we wanted to start some events. So it's like we found some friends who wanted to run a trivia night. And we're like, we'll give it a shot. We found a guy who wanted to run a cornhole league here. And we're like, yeah, that's like perfect.
Awesome.
Bring people together, hanging out. We started a run club, and we had a book club that started here. So like just trying to find these events. We're like, all right, what events like make sense to have here for the people that want to hang out here?
Right. And also like, what do our customers want to do?
Yeah. And it's like we've tried so many things that just completely failed.
Flopped.
Yeah. And that's like, I think part of it is like, we figure out like, all right, like who are our customers and what do they want to do? But like some of it is like, you're not going to be perfect, but I think it's important, like trying stuff that just doesn't work.
Oh yeah. I mean, dude, that's like so valuable, being able to just throw something at the wall, see that it doesn't stick, and just be like, oh, learn that lesson and then move on. Don't keep digging yourself into the hole, but also like, don't beat yourself up. Just try something different.
It's like, make some changes. It's like, we pretty soon out of the gate realized that like, all right, we need to serve more than just beer too. So we started doing a hard seltzer.
Yeah.
And even like where we're at now, we're thinking about like, all right, how do we start doing some like maybe like canned cocktails or some other drinks? Because like we realized at the beginning, if this is going to be kind of a community space, not everyone is here just for the beer.
Right.
They might be here for the social aspect. So it's like, how do we kind of have something that a wider variety of people might want to have? Not necessarily that we're not focusing on the beer, because it's like, that's still going to be the thing that we probably sell the most of.
Right.
But it's like having that one person in the group who doesn't want beer. How do you keep that group around and then engage them and build that community around them?
Right. And then it's also too, like if you're, a couple coming in here, one of you is excited about the beer, one of you isn't.
Yeah.
Like rather than one or both of you having to kind of be like bummed out that we're starting like, oh, we're at this brewery and like, I guess I'm going to let my partner drink a beer while I sit here and kind of be sad about it.
Yeah. Like that sucks.
That sucks. So now here's a drink that you'll enjoy. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I think, like trying to progress like that and just like keep making small incremental changes that make sense with what we want to do, knowing that like our goal is to be a community focused space.
Right. And
like our goal has always been to be kind of this smaller local brewery that like, all right, how do we lean into that with new ideas that make sense? Like starting to add some food options, and not just adding food options, but like, how do we add food options that were made at a deli right down the road from us?
Exactly.
Keep
it
it's
as
like,
local as possible.
Yeah. And that's with everything. It's like, all right, from day one, I'm like, we're buying all of our grain from local Maine maltsters.
That's incredible.
It just like, it makes sense, and that's part of what I love about Maine as well, is people embrace local products and embrace being part of the Maine economy and the Maine community.
Right.
So I'm like, it just doesn't make sense to be a brewery in Maine and not use local Maine grain.
No, it doesn't.
It just doesn't make sense to me. And there's like certain times it's like not 100% of our grain is local because you can't get everything local. That's just the reality of it. But it's like, 95% of it is.
Yeah.
And I don't ever see changing that. It just doesn't make sense to me. Same with like a lot of our products is like keep things as local as possible, promote the local economy. And I think that's what a small business is all about.
Yeah. It's community, not just your customers, but also your vendors.
Yeah.
And the people who are kind of like supplying you the stuff that you need to operate.
Yeah. It's like lean on them too, because, the place we get our grain from, the place we get food from, different products, our like t-shirts are all local. Like it just makes sense to keep products local, lean on the vendors for support and help. And they're helpful because it's like everyone is in a similar situation too. Yeah. If they have a similar philosophy of like, yeah, we want to help you because you're another local business. Yeah. Like what can we do to help make your life easier?
A rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what's been like the most surprising aspect of opening this place?
Yeah, I mean it's tough to say right off the bat because we're still in that like we're under a year.
Yeah,
we've been open.
We're like kind of still under 6 months.
Yeah, we've been open for under 6 months. I haven't even been in this building for a full year.
It's crazy.
So it's like this is like not exactly maybe the most like maybe in a few years we'll look back and be like, oh wow, even that was wildly wrong.
Yes.
But I think the most surprising thing is just, I mean, frankly, it's like the people show up.
Yeah.
I know this sounds like insane, but just like being more vulnerable. It's like you don't know. Like when we opened, I was confident in what we did and what we had, but I was like, there's a chance that A, no one shows up, B, everyone hates what we have.
Right. This beer sucks.
So that I was like, that was totally possible.
Yeah.
And it was like always went through my head, you got to keep confident and be positive about it. But at the end of the day, you're like, the market will decide. People will decide if they like this place, if they like our product. So I think genuinely the most surprising thing is like, it's worked so far.
Yeah. We have customers.
Yeah. And
regular customers.
Yeah. And it's like, it's incredible. Like the friendships even in this short period of time, like the amount of like regulars and customers we have who it's like are incredible people.
Yeah.
I would consider like friends and, like I'm excited to see when they come in here because we get to chat for a couple hours.
Yeah. And it's like, they're now characters in like, if Argenta was like a sitcom. Yeah. They're now like these cool, weird, interesting, fun characters. And that's like, so cool.
It's so awesome. Yeah. I love the people that come in here because it's like, now we have like a staff, we have another employee too. And it's like really fun to like build this community.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, like it can be easy to get stuck in the day-to-day monotony of like, just like, oh man, I have not slept in 6 months. Like I'm exhausted.
I had 4 days off.
Yeah. I don't take any time off. But then it's like, you realize like, this is like I think something really cool that we're starting to build here. And it's exciting to see where it's going.
So speaking of where it's going, what's next? What's next for Argenta?
Yeah, I think the big thing is like keep leaning on the community and keep building this place for locals over everything.
Right.
That's super important too, is like I don't want this to be specifically for tourists.
Yeah.
I want
tourists
this to be
are welcome.
Oh, 100%. And they're again like the lifeblood of Maine in the summertime. But it's like I want this to be a place that like locals want to hang out at. And like we do stuff that caters to them over tourists. You know what I mean? Because it's like come winter time when all the tourists are gone, like who are your customers going to be?
Oh yeah.
They're going to be the people that you've been hopefully like relying on, trying to, be there for all summer.
The middle of February when it's a blizzard outside, who's going to show up? Who's going to hike through the snow to come grab a beer?
Yeah. Hopefully the people that you've been, trying to help out and like
do right by.
Prioritize here. So I think the future of Argenta is it's bright. It's a lot more community events. It's a lot more doing things for locals. It's starting to do a little bit of like distribution for our draft beer.
Cool.
Gotten a lot of people asking for it.
Yeah.
Again, it's like we're small. We don't have a big production capacity. We have 3 people that work here.
Yeah.
There's only so much we can do, but I think small incremental steps that make sense. And with that is like, all right, so when we do distribution, picking the right partners and picking people who we think would put our beer, in the best possible circumstance with like, clean lines, clean glasses. They're able to like chat to customers about it. People that can be advocates of our product and vice versa. It's like now we get to be advocates of their restaurants and bars.
Yeah.
And I think that's exciting. Just sort of extending the reach a bit.
Extending the community.
Yeah, exactly. And just like slow growth, like trying to do things right, trying to treat people right. I think that's the most important thing over everything.
It's incredible.
Something like that.
Well, we've got to go open the tasting room.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes before we're open.
But so cool. Thanks for sitting down. Thanks for talking to me. I think obviously I work here, so I'm biased, but I think that this is in such a cool company, and that I think you have such a good perspective on like making sure that like the right stakeholders are taken care of in like the customers, the community, and like the employees who work here. Like you're always trying to do right by everybody involved, and I think that is not only like the right thing to do morally, but I also think it's a really sound business sort of strategy. So, good job.
That's the idea.
Proud of you.
Thank you.
Here's to 6 more months.
See if we can do it. Onward.
Onward.